Webinar series. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Graham Davies, Governor of Rotary District 9685. This webinar series is our online component of our district conference, our one-day district conference held at the Concourse at Chatswood on the 23rd of February this year. Tonight's webinar topic concerns child protection, which is of vital interest to all Rotarians. It's also a topic that generates lots of interest and lots of questions. So if you'd like to put a question to our panel tonight, please just type in the question from your screen, and that'll go down to Les, who will be able to present that to the panel a little later. Our panel tonight consists of both our child protection officers for our district. We have past District Governor John Wakefield, who has extensive experience in child protection and sexual harassment areas.
Good evening.
We also have Mr Newman from the Rotary Club of North Gosford, or I should say Gosford North, and Andrew also has extensive experience in child protection. Andrew, I believe that you're beginning the presentation tonight.
Thank you, District Governor Graham. Good evening, fellow Rotarians. As Graham mentioned, my name is Andrew Newman from Gosford North Rotary Club, and I am one of the child protection officers for the district.
And I'm John Wakefield, as Graham has introduced me earlier.
We've had a process in Rotary to ensure child protection for quite a number of years, and that process covers all Rotarians and volunteers who are working with children and young people, and it required them to sign a prohibited persons declaration. These declarations were then kept as club records within the club. A new process started for 2014, and an interim form is available on the district website for all Rotarians or any volunteers that need it for this year, 2014, and they should also be kept in club records. When we say we're working with children, the definition of children and young people is anybody under the age of 18 years of age, or anybody who is at school, who is at TAFE, or is a university student. So it does extend beyond the age of 18. And all children and young people have a right to remain, to feel safe and to be safe. And Rotary obviously has an obligation to comply with the legislation which protects children and young people.
And Rotary also has its own definitions, and under the new system of new generations, all of those persons up to the age of 25 are also covered by this legislation.
So all Rotarians have a responsibility to create the safest environment for all young people at all Rotary activities. But it doesn't just apply to Rotarians, it applies to our spouses, our partners, our family members who might be there, or any volunteers who've come along to assist the club in any of the functions that Rotary is running that involve children and young people. We also have a legal responsibility to follow through any report that a young person makes whilst under the care of Rotary or is engaged in any Rotary activity of any type. So what do we do if an allegation is actually made?
Well, first of all, you need to believe the person who is making the allegation. You cannot be judge and jury. If it's a matter that you think requires the police intervention, well, you contact the police and you leave it with them, because they are the ones with the experts. But from a Rotary perspective, of course, once you receive that complaint, you should notify your club president, and the club president has the obligation to notify the district governor, who only has a window of 72 hours from the time he or she learns of it to notify Rotary International.
And additionally, many Rotarians would also be mandatory notifiers under legislation. For example, teachers, doctors, childcare workers. So they have that obligation 24 hours a day, not just in their work. So if an allegation is made to them, they are required to report that to the appropriate authorities, Department of Community Services, or any of the other child protection agencies, but they must report it. Currently, presidents are responsible for the club maintaining the list of Rotarians who have completed or have not completed a prohibited persons declaration. And they also have an obligation to make sure that Any club member or volunteer who has not signed a prohibited persons declaration must not work unsupervised with children or young people. So they need to do a risk assessment if they've got people who haven't currently signed any of those declarations if they're going to a Rotary function.
There will always be people who you could term to be conscientious objectors, who for some reason with their own right do not wish to put their name forward or have a working with children check done. If that's the case, it comes back to the club president to have that risk assessment when any club is involved with any children's organisation or a function that involves children in your club.
So where did the new child protection processes come from? They've come from the legislation which has been changed in New South Wales. It brings it broadly into line with what is happening in the other states, and it's being phased in over a number of years. Rotary is involved in the processes for 2015, along with all secondary school teachers, and for example in 2016 it's all primary school teachers, but there are other groups as well.
Rotary is with the group that is referred to as volunteers. Now there are a number of other I think there's something like about another 100,000 volunteers out there who are also next year will be submitting their Working with Children check, and they are the ones with all the sporting organisations, Little Athletics and any other group at all. And of course they will, there's currently talks going on with the Office of the Children's Guardian, getting all the sporting organisations up and running first before we become involved.
So what are the new child protection processes and how do you go about being cleared to work with children? Well, first of all, you need to fill in an online application form. So you need to go to the website, which is www.newcheck.kids.newsouthwales.gov.au. You need to go to that site and fill in an online application form. If you don't have access to the internet, there is a phone number that we can provide for you to ring and get assistance in making the application. In making the application, please make sure that the details that you provide are exactly the same as the details which are on your identity documents, such as your driver's license or your passport, or any other document you might need to make 100 points in the same way as when you go to the motor registry the first time to get a driver's license. So please make sure you have that accurate, because that's very, very important. In making the application, it is absolutely essential that you select the correct category. There are two categories. You're either a paid worker or a volunteer worker. If you're a paid worker, such as a teacher or a childcare worker, there is an $80 fee that you need to pay, and it is not refundable. For Rotarians, it is free, the same as it is for other volunteers. So please be very careful and make sure that you check the right box there. If you're applying on behalf of Rotary, you are a volunteer. However, if, for example, you're like myself and you work with children, you will apply for a paid workers check, and that will cover you both for working and volunteering in New South Wales for the next 5 years. So please make sure you select the correct one. You cannot take out a volunteer's clearance and use that to work with children. You must pay for it if you are working with children in an employment category.
The reason that they've asked us to wait until 2015 is when this came in June of 2013, the computers crashed because everybody decided to get online and do their Working with Children check, and the system wasn't able to do it. Now they've streamlined it, and now of course we'll be, from I think the 1st of April next year, we will now start to go online and do our own checks.
The check for both volunteer and paid workers will remain in place for 5 years. So after your application, it's currently able to be operated on for 5 years. Once you've submitted that form, you'll receive an application number that looks like APP 12345667. It'll start with APP. Now that's a very important number, and you need to take that with you when you and your proof of identity when you go to a New South Wales motor registry, a New South Wales council agency that offers RMS services, roads and maritime services, so that you can actually make an application. You'll need your application number and your proof of identity, and it's the same as a driver's licence, and you'll need to put both of those in to actually apply to get your WWC number. If cleared, you'll be issued with a WWC number within 4 weeks, but it's usually much quicker than that, and it certainly has been up to this point. You'll receive the outcome of your Working with Children check number by email if you've submitted an email address, and obviously that is the best way to do it. If you don't have an email address, they will post you the result of that.
And if you're not cleared, you're in a category which is called barred, and that for then is that it's also looked at again from a Working with Children's perspective, because it only relates to matters of assault against children or some offence which some person has been convicted of in relation to children. So I wouldn't worry too much about it if you get a barred situation, but then again it's up to the club president to make sure that those things are put in place.
When you receive your WWC number, it will end in a V if you're a volunteer for Rotary and you haven't paid your $80. And if you're an employed person in an industry with children involved in it, such as myself, it will end up, instead of having a V on the end of it, it will have an E on the end of it. And that's to distinguish between volunteers and people employed. So, however, the WWC number coming back to you alone doesn't clear you to become a volunteer for Rotary. Rotary, either the club or the district, somebody will have to go online to verify your clearance, and they need to register as the employer, and to do that they'll need your WWC number, they'll need your surname and your date of birth. Now this process will need to be determined within Rotary, as it's currently we only have a process for Rotary in place for exchange students, but advice on that will be forthcoming before this Rotary has to go live in applying for your WWC number.
We're hoping that we'll have some clearer picture on that by the District Assembly, because we will have a person from the Office of the Children's Guardian to give us a talk early in that first plenary session about where the government is with this process.
Presidents of their Rotary clubs will obviously need to lead their club through this process. Records will need to be maintained as they are currently, and members' and volunteers' approvals to work with young children will need to be kept on record. When you put the WWC number in and you get a clearance, you then need to make a printout of it, or Rotary will need to make a printout of it, which is then kept on record so that you can remind the member in 5 years' time that they need to reapply for a renewed WWC number. So that is really important, that the club needs to have records of members, because obviously not all members will be cleared at the one time. New members will start their 5 years from the time they submit their applications.
The way it's turning out, it looks like it will need to be a club duty in relation to checking with the Working with Children check, because otherwise who knows the people who are making it, because they have to verify that, one, they are a Rotarian, and two, that they are known to the club.
As we've mentioned before, presidents are responsible for the Rotary Club maintaining the list of Rotarians who have submitted a list, but they're also required to keep a list of those who have not submitted or been cleared for a WWC number. Now, no Rotarian or person, volunteer, who doesn't have a WWC number is allowed to work unsupervised with children and young people at any Rotary function. That hasn't changed from the current Prohibited Persons Declaration. So it's really important that club presidents have in place a process that will do a risk assessment if the activity involves children and there are members or volunteers within the club who have not got a WWC number that is current and cleared. Youth exchange. All host parents, siblings and anybody over the age of 18, relatives who live in the host family house, must have a Working with Children check. In other words, they must apply for a WWC number before the exchange student arrives, and it must be verified by the Rotary Child Protection Officer. Currently I'm going through and checking those against the system and providing a list of those that have been cleared. The host club or the club counsellor must also ensure that all approvals are recorded in their records. That is most important. Currently, that's the exchange student process is the only one that Rotary has actually locked in at the moment to give that final approval. But as we've mentioned before, that process will be clarified, and hopefully at the District Assembly we'll have a bit more information for you on that.
And whilst we're talking about youth exchange, of course, for a district to be certified by Rotary International to take part in the youth exchange program, they have to do a number of things to fulfil that certification. Working with Children check is just one of those things. So this is why this is a very important piece of legislation from the New South Wales Government, but it also dovetails into what Rotary International has put in place worldwide.
At this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. If any people out there have any questions of us in regards to child protection.
We have a question from Simon Bryan, who asks, are PPDs still applicable at all?
They remain current till the new process comes into place, and there is an interim form on the website for any new members who join Rotary between now and when we go live with the new WWC checks next year.
And a second question from David Parabo. Will this mean that each Rotary Club will need to register as an employer, or will there be a global employer?
Well, that's one of the things, as Andrew mentioned earlier, that still has to be worked out. At this stage, it looks like it will be the club. However, if there are other options that somebody would like to put forward, we'd like to discuss them. But of course, that needs to be talked about at another location.
Can a Rotary Youth Exchange student stay overnight with a mate whose parents do not have clearance?
Yes, most definitely they can, and it's written very clearly into the rules and regulations. However, the Rotary Club, who is the host club for the exchange student, and the parents would need to do a risk assessment in exactly the same way as you would do it if it was your own children who were going to stay over at a mate's place. There is certainly nothing to stop that, but obviously common sense has to play a part in making an assessment. How well do you know the people that they're going to stay with, and do you have confidence that they will be well looked after? And as I said, in exactly the same way as you would do it if it was your own son or daughter going to stay with a mate.
And also you would need to check with those parents to ensure that they know that the youth exchange student is coming to stay with them overnight.
Well, thank you, Andrew and John. I'm sure that we are much better informed as a result of your presentation tonight. Indeed, as a district, we are very fortunate to have such knowledgeable folk leading our transfer to this new system and meeting the new regulations. I believe it's going to, the transition will be very straightforward and won't present too many problems at all, but it is appropriate or important that each Rotarian understands what's involved. On behalf of our producers, Les and Bobby, may I thank you for your company tonight and invite you to join us again same time tomorrow night when we'll have a range of youth programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.